Take my coat, sir. You're shaking. The voice was small, almost swallowed by the roar of the storm. Marcus Sinclair turned slowly, rainwater streaming down the collar of his ruined $2,000 suit, and saw the boy standing in the alleyway between two shuttered buildings on 11th Street. The child could not have been more than 10 years old. His feet were wrapped in plastic bags tied with string. His hair was plastered flat against his forehead, and in his outstretched hands was a thin gray jacket, soaked but folded with strange care, as if it were something precious being offered to a king. Marcus did not move. He could not. The cold had reached so deep into his bones that even his shivering had begun to feel distant, like something happening to another man. His luxury sedan sat dead at the curb half a block away, its engine drowned by floodwater that had risen faster than the city's warnings had predicted. His phone was a dark brick in his pocket. The driver he had dismissed 2 hours ago, after their meeting ran late, was halfway across the state by now. And the rain, the merciless December rain that had turned the streets of downtown Cleveland into rivers, showed no sign of stopping. "Please, sir," the boy stepped closer, holding the jacket higher. "You're gonna get sick." "Take it." Marcus stared at the child, then at the jacket. It was old. The seams were split at the shoulders. One button was missing, replaced by a safety pin. He had owned watches that cost more than every garment this boy had ever worn in his life combined. And yet in that moment, standing under the awning of a closed pawn shop with the rain hammering down around them like fists on a coffin, that thin gray jacket looked to Marcus Sinclair like the most valuable thing in the world. "Son," Marcus managed, his voice cracking from cold, "where are your parents?" The boy lowered his eyes. "Don't have none, sir." "Then where do you live?" The boy gestured vaguely behind him, toward a stack of cardboard boxes pushed against the wall and covered with a torn blue tarp. Marcus had walked past it twice in the last hour without ever seeing what it was. A home. A child's home. Just 6 feet of cardboard and plastic against the longest night of the year. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Eli." "Eli," Marcus repeated the name carefully as if memorizing it. "Eli, that jacket. That's yours, isn't it? That's the only one you have." The boy hesitated. Then he nodded. "But you got the shakes bad, sir." "My mama, before she died, she said when somebody's got the shakes, you gotta warm 'em up quick or their heart can stop." She was a nurse. She knew about hearts. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with the cold. He had built an empire on knowing how to read people. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals across continents. He had stared down hostile boards and unfriendly senators and competitors who would have ruined him without losing a moment's sleep. And he could not, for the life of him, find the right words to say to a 10-year-old boy holding out a soaking jacket in the rain. "Eli," he said finally, "I can't take your coat." The boy's face fell. Not in the way Marcus expected, not with relief or embarrassment, but with something closer to fear. "Why not, sir? Did I do something wrong?" No, you didn't. But son, if I take that, you'll freeze tonight." Eli shook his head firmly. "I got the boxes. I got the tarp. I've been doing this for months. But you ain't dressed for it. You're soft, sir. No offense. Rich folks always are. The cold hurts y'all worse." He held the jacket out again, his thin arms trembling under the weight of wet fabric. "Please. I've been watching you for 20 minutes. You walked past me 4 times trying to find a phone that works. You're getting slower. That's how it starts." Marcus looked at the boy. Really looked at him. And he saw that Eli was not asking out of charity, not really. He was asking the way a doctor asks a patient to take a pill, with the calm authority of someone who had watched cold kill before and did not intend to watch it kill again. "What's your last name, Eli?" "Whitfield, sir. Eli Whitfield." Marcus closed his eyes for one long second. Then he reached out and accepted the jacket. The jacket was heavier than Marcus expected. Not from its fabric, which was thin and cheap, but from the weight of what it represented. He held it for a moment in his hands, feeling the cold dampness, and then, because the boy was watching him with such fierce concentration, he draped it around his shoulders. It barely reached past his shoulder blades, The sleeves dangled uselessly at his sides. But the moment the fabric settled against his neck, something inside Marcus broke open quietly, the way ice cracks on a pond when no one is watching. "There," Eli said, satisfied. He nodded once, the way a small surgeon might nod after a successful procedure. "Now sit down on them steps." Sitting helps. Standing makes your blood go cold faster. Marcus obeyed. He sank down onto the wet concrete steps of the pawn shop, his ruined Italian shoes splashing into a puddle that had gathered there. Eli sat beside him, close enough that Marcus could feel the bony warmth of the boy's shoulder through his soaked shirt. "You been out here long, sir?" 2 hours, maybe." "The car flooded." "That's a long time in this kind of rain." Eli shook his head with the seriousness of a man twice Marcus's age. "Most folks wouldn't last that long." "You must have been moving. That's why your heart kept going." "Eli," Marcus turned slightly to face the boy. "How old are you, son?" 10, sir. Almost 11. My birthday's in January." "And you said your mother passed. How long ago?" The boy was quiet for a long moment, watching the rain pour off the awning in silver sheets. "Last winter," he finally said. "She got sick. Real sick. The kind where the medicine costs too much, so you just keep working anyway until you can't." He paused. "She worked at the hospital, sir. She helped sick people all day, and then she came home and she was the sick one and nobody helped her back." Marcus felt his throat close. "And your father?" "Never had one of those, sir. Just Mama." "You don't have any other family?" "No aunts, no uncles, grandparents. Mama had a sister down in Georgia, but she don't know where I am. After Mama died, they was gonna put me in a home, so I ran. The lady from the state, she was nice, but she said they might split me from Mama's stuff. Her Bible, her wedding ring, the picture of her and me at the zoo." Eli's voice grew very small. "That's all I got left of her, sir. I couldn't let nobody take it." Marcus looked at the cardboard structure across the alley. He understood suddenly why the boy had built it where he did. It was tucked between two buildings, hidden from the main street, but visible from the steps where they now sat. Eli had chosen a home he could defend. "Where is it?" Marcus asked gently. "Your mama's things." "Under the tarp, sir. In a backpack. I sleep with it under my head." The rain kept falling. Somewhere down the street, a car alarm began to wail and then died. The street lamps flickered. Marcus realized he had stopped shivering, though he was not sure if it was the jacket or the boy beside him or something else entirely that had warmed him. "Eli," he said carefully, "do you eat? I mean regularly. Do you have food? There's a church on 15th Street that does sandwiches Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the man at the bodega on the corner, sometimes he gives me the bread that's about to go bad. I do okay. I'm not starving or nothing. I'm just little 'cause Mama was little too." He smiled faintly, the first smile Marcus had seen on his face. "She used to say good things come in small packages. She was right about that." Eli looked up at him, surprised. "You think so, sir?" "I know so." They sat in silence for another moment. Then Eli said, "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Anything. How come you didn't go in nowhere? There's stores open. Restaurants. You could have waited inside. Why was you out here walking around in the rain?" Marcus almost laughed at the question. It was, he realized, the question he should have been asking himself for the past 2 hours. Why hadn't he stepped inside? He had passed at least 3 open establishments. A diner with steamed-up windows. A hotel lobby. A 24-hour pharmacy with bright fluorescent lights. The answer, when it came to him, was so ugly he almost did not say it aloud. "I didn't want anyone to see me like this," he said quietly. "Wet. Out of control. I was embarrassed." Eli was quiet for a long moment. The rain made a hollow sound against the awning above them, and somewhere far away, a siren began and faded. The boy reached up and wiped his nose with the back of his wrist, then turned to look at Marcus with eyes that seemed too old for his face. "Sir," he said slowly, "that's the saddest thing I ever heard." Marcus blinked. "What is?" "That you was out here freezing 'cause you didn't want nobody to see you." That means you got more people watching you than caring about you. Mama used to say that's the loneliest way a person can live. The words struck Marcus harder than the cold ever had. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He had built his life on being watched. Watched by shareholders, watched by reporters, watched by men who wanted his position and women who wanted his name. He had cultivated a reputation for control, for never appearing diminished, never appearing weak. And a 10-year-old boy sitting on wet pavement had just diagnosed it as loneliness in a single sentence. Your mama was a wise woman, Eli. Yes, sir. She was. Marcus reached into his pocket. The phone was still dark. He pulled out his wallet, soaked through, and opened it. The leather was warped, but the cash inside was still mostly dry. $600 in 20s and 50s. He had withdrawn it that morning for a charity luncheon he had attended, and then forgotten about by the time the entree was served. He held the bills out toward Eli. The boy looked at them, then looked at Marcus, then looked back at the bills. He did not reach for them. Why aren't you taking it, son? Sir, Eli said carefully, I gave you my coat 'cause you was freezing. I didn't give it to you so you'd pay me back. If I take that money, then it wasn't a real gift. Mama said a gift you get paid for isn't a gift. It's just trading. Marcus lowered the bills slowly. Then how about this? I'm not paying you for the coat. I'm asking you, as a separate matter entirely, if you would do me the honor of letting me help you tonight. Not because of the coat. Because of you. Eli considered this with the careful seriousness of a judge weighing testimony. What kind of help, sir? A hotel room. A hot meal. Dry clothes. One night where you don't have to sleep with your mama's backpack under your head because you're afraid someone will take it. The boy looked down at his hands. They were small and chapped and red from the cold. Sir, if I go with you, what happens tomorrow? Tomorrow I gotta come back here. Tomorrow there's no hotel. So maybe one warm night just makes the cold ones hurt worse. I don't know if I can handle remembering being warm. Marcus felt something shift inside him, something he could not name. He looked at this child, this boy who had survived a year on the streets of Cleveland with nothing but a tarp and his mother's wisdom, and he understood that Eli was not being stubborn. Eli was being smart. Eli was protecting himself from hope, because hope was the most dangerous thing a homeless child could carry. If this story is touching your heart, please give it a like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this remind us that kindness travels farther than miles, and that sometimes the smallest hands carry the biggest lessons. If you believe even one person can change a child's life, please subscribe so we can keep bringing you stories that matter. Eli, Marcus said, and his voice was so steady now that he barely recognized it as his own. What if I told you tomorrow doesn't have to look like yesterday? The boy looked up. What do you mean, sir? I mean, what if I came back? Tomorrow, and the day after. What if I made sure that the warmth doesn't have to be a memory? Eli stared at him. The rain had begun to slow just slightly, and a single drop fell from the awning and landed on the boy's cheek like a tear he had not yet learned how to cry. Sir, why would you do that? You don't even know me. I know that you saw a stranger shaking in the rain, and you gave him the only coat you owned. Eli, do you have any idea how many people walked past me tonight before you stopped? Do you know how many of them had warm offices and dry cars and umbrellas? You were the only one who saw me. Mama always said you gotta see people. Otherwise, what's the point of having eyes? Marcus could not speak for a moment. He sat there with the rain dripping off the edge of the awning, and the boy's old jacket draped uselessly across his shoulders, and thought about all the eyes he had paid for over the years. Security teams, private investigators, public relations consultants whose job was to manage how he was seen. And not one of them, not one in 30 years, had ever taught him how to actually see anyone else. Eli, he said finally, will you trust me? Just for tonight. I give you my word that nothing happens to your mother's things. We come back tomorrow morning if you want to come back. But just for tonight, let me get you warm. The boy was quiet. He looked across the alley at his cardboard home, at the blue tarp sagging under the weight of the rain. Then he looked back at Marcus, and his eyes were very serious. "Sir, if you break your word to me, I won't be mad. I'll just know, and I'll know about all the other people you say things to. So please, if you can't keep your promise, tell me now, and we can just sit here till the rain stops, and then you can go home." Marcus felt his eyes burn. "Eli Whitfield, I have not kept a single promise in 20 years that mattered to anyone but a banker. I'm going to keep this one." The boy studied him. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay, sir." He stood up and walked across the alley to the cardboard shelter. He moved aside the tarp with surprising care, reached underneath, and pulled out a small navy blue backpack. It was worn at the straps and patched at the bottom with silver duct tape. He held it close against his chest the way another child might hold a teddy bear, and when he came back to the steps, his small body was trembling, though not from cold. "All right, sir. I'm ready." Marcus stood up. The boy's jacket slipped from his shoulders and he caught it and folded it carefully, the same way Eli had held it out to him an hour before, and handed it back. "I think this belongs to you, son. And tonight we're going to find you a coat that actually fits." They walked together down 11th Street. The rain had begun to slacken, but the wind picked up and Marcus pulled the boy close against his side without thinking about it. Eli did not pull away. 2 blocks down, at the corner of 11th and Madison, the warm yellow lights of the Lakeshore Hotel glowed through the wet air like a lighthouse. Marcus had stayed there once, years ago, before he had been wealthy enough to require the kind of hotel where you never crossed paths with strangers. The doorman, an older black man in a green wool coat, opened the door for them and then stopped, his hand still on the brass handle, taking in the sight. A man in a ruined suit, a child clutching a battered backpack, both of them dripping water onto the marble floor of his lobby. "Sir," the doorman said carefully, "is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," Marcus said. "My car flooded. This young man helped me out of the rain. I'd like a room for the night. 2 rooms, actually. Adjoining." The doorman's eyes flicked to Eli, then back to Marcus. There was something in his face that was neither judgment nor suspicion, but a kind of cautious recognition. "Of course, sir. The front desk is just to your right." Marcus paused. He looked at the doorman's name tag, James. "Thank you for not making this difficult." "Sir," James said softly, "I've been doing this job 31 years. I learned a long time ago, when somebody walks through these doors with a wet child, you don't ask questions. You just open the door wider." Marcus felt the words settle in him like a small, unexpected blessing. The clerk at the front desk was a young woman with red hair and a nervous smile. Marcus did not bother with charm. He gave her his credit card, his identification, and a $100 bill folded into her palm. He asked for 2 rooms, a connecting door, and a porter who could go to the all-night drugstore 3 blocks over for clothes in a child's size, plus toiletries, plus pajamas, plus a stuffed animal of any kind. The clerk's eyes widened slightly at the list, but she did not question it. "And dinner, sir. The restaurant is closed, but we have a 24-hour room service menu." Marcus turned to Eli, who was standing very still beside him, clutching the backpack with both hands. "Son, what sounds good?" Eli looked up at Marcus with an expression that was both wonder and confusion, as if he had been asked to choose a star from the sky. "Sir, I don't know what's on the menu." The clerk, sensing the moment, leaned forward gently. "Sweetheart, we have grilled cheese sandwiches, and tomato soup, and French fries, and ice cream sundaes for dessert. Would any of that sound good to you?" Eli's eyes went very wide. "All of it, ma'am." "Can I have all of it?" "You can have all of it," Marcus said firmly. "Send it up to the room. And add a club sandwich for me. Coffee. Anything hot." The porter, a young man in a burgundy vest named Devon, was dispatched with cash and a list. Marcus and Eli rode the elevator to the 7th floor in silence. The boy stood very straight, his backpack still clutched against his chest, his eyes fixed on the brass numbers above the door as they climbed. When the doors opened, Eli did not move until Marcus touched his shoulder. "It's all right, son. We're here." The room was nothing extravagant by Marcus's standards, just a standard double on a middle floor of a respectable hotel. But Eli walked into it, the way another child might walk into a cathedral. He stopped just inside the door and stared. The bed, the pillows, the desk, the window with its heavy curtains pulled back to show the rain-blurred city below. The bathroom with its white towels stacked on a chrome rack. "Sir," he whispered, "this is just for one night. Just for tonight. And there's a bed for me too. There's a bed for you. The next room over. With its own bathroom. We can leave the door between them open if you'd like." Eli set his backpack down on the floor with the same care a museum curator might use to place an artifact on a velvet pedestal. Then he walked to the bed, reached out and touched the comforter with the tips of his fingers, as if testing whether it was real. "It's warm," he said. "The heater's on, son. You can warm up now. Why don't you take a hot shower while we wait for your clothes? There's soap and shampoo in there. Take as long as you want." Eli looked at the bathroom door. Then he looked at his backpack on the floor. He did not move. "I won't touch it, Eli. I promise. I'll sit right here by the window. The backpack stays exactly where you put it." The boy nodded slowly and disappeared into the bathroom. Marcus heard the lock click. He heard the water begin to run. And then, after a long minute, he heard something that nearly broke him. He heard a child crying. Not loud sobs, but the small, gasping breaths of a boy who had been holding something in for far too long and had finally found a place private enough to let it out. Marcus walked to the window and stared at the dark city. He did not move from that spot for 15 minutes. He did not check his phone, which the porter had thoughtfully placed on a rice-filled bowl to dry. He did not call his assistant. He did not think about the merger meeting he was supposed to attend in New York on Monday morning. He simply stood there and let a 10-year-old boy weep in private, because he understood that this was the first dignity he could offer. When Eli came out of the bathroom, his hair was clean and wet and combed flat with his fingers. He was wrapped in a white hotel robe that was 3 sizes too big, and his eyes were red, but his face was calm. The porter had returned with bags from the drugstore. Marcus laid the new clothes out on the bed. Soft cotton pajamas with rocket ships printed on them. Underwear, socks, a pair of warm sneakers, a blue puffer coat, and sitting on top of the pile, a small brown stuffed bear with a red ribbon around its neck. Eli stared at the bear for a long time. "Sir," he said quietly, "I'm too old for a bear." "Are you?" The boy thought about it. "Mama gave me one when I was little. His name was Patch. He got lost when we moved out of the apartment after she got sick. Then maybe this one's name is Patch too. Maybe Patch found his way back." Eli picked up the bear. He held it against his chest with both hands. He did not cry again, but he closed his eyes for a long moment, and when he opened them, something in his face had softened in a way Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. The food arrived 10 minutes later on a silver cart pushed by an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Margaret. She set the plates on the small round table by the window with quiet efficiency, and when she saw Eli sitting on the edge of the bed in his rocket ship pajamas, holding a stuffed bear, she did not stare. She simply smiled. "There's extra ketchup under the napkin, sweetheart. And I brought you 2 ice cream sundaes instead of one because the second one's free if you order before midnight, and you looked like a young man who could put away 2. Eli's eyes widened. "2, ma'am." "2? With cherries? I figured you for a cherries person." Margaret left them with a small wave. Eli walked slowly to the table and sat down. He stared at the food in front of him. Grilled cheese, golden and steaming. A small white bowl of tomato soup with a sprinkle of pepper on top. A pile of crispy French fries. A glass of milk. 2 ice cream sundaes waiting in the corner of the cart, the whipped cream still standing tall. He did not pick up his fork. "Eli, sir, can I say something first? Mama always made us say grace." "Of course you can." The boy folded his small hands together and bowed his head. "Dear God, thank you for this food. Thank you for the warm room. Thank you for the bear that maybe is Patch. Thank you for the man who let me give him my coat, even though I think you sent him to me more than I gave anything to him. Please bless Mama up in heaven and tell her I'm okay tonight." Amen. Marcus could not speak. He looked down at his own plate and waited until he could trust his voice again. When he finally said amen, the word came out quieter than he had intended. Eli ate slowly. He chewed each bite carefully, the way someone eats when they have learned that food is not always promised tomorrow. Halfway through the soup, he looked up. "Sir, are you a rich man?" Marcus paused with his coffee halfway to his lips. "Yes, Eli. I'm a rich man." "How rich?" "Very rich, son." Eli considered this. "Did being rich make you happy, sir?" Marcus set the coffee down. He thought about the question carefully because the boy deserved a careful answer, not a polite one. "No, Eli. It didn't. It made my life easier in some ways. It paid for nice things. But it didn't make me happy. I think I forgot how to be happy a long time ago. I'm not sure I ever really knew." "How come?" "Because I confused having things with being loved. And by the time I figured out the difference, most of the people I should have loved were gone." Eli nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. "Mama said money is like salt. A little bit makes the food taste right. Too much and you can't taste nothing else. Your mother kept saying the wisest things, Eli. I wish I could have met her." "Me too, sir. She would have liked you." "What makes you think that?" "'Cause you listen. Mama always said most grown-ups talk like they got somewhere else to be. You don't. You're here." Marcus did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He simply ate his sandwich and watched the boy across the table polish off his grilled cheese and start in on the French fries. When Eli finally reached the first sundae, he ate it with the slow reverence of a king consuming his last meal. He scraped the bowl with a long spoon. He drank the melted ice cream at the bottom. He did not touch the second sundae. "Sir, can I save this one for tomorrow?" "Eli, the hotel won't let you keep ice cream in the room overnight. It'll melt." The boy looked stricken. Marcus understood instantly what he was really asking. But he continued gently, "Tomorrow morning I'm ordering you pancakes. With strawberries. And bacon. And anything else you want. I promise. The food doesn't run out tonight, son. It doesn't run out tomorrow either." Eli looked at him for a long time. Then slowly, he picked up his spoon and began to eat the second sundae. When he was finished, he sat back in the chair, folded his small hands across his stomach, and let out a long, contented sigh that sounded older than 10 years. "Sir," he said, "I think I might sleep tonight. For real sleep, I mean. Not the kind where you keep one eye open." Marcus tucked the boy into the bed in the adjoining room. Eli insisted on sleeping with the backpack against his pillow and patched the bear cradled in the crook of one arm. He looked impossibly small in the queen-sized bed, the white comforter swallowing him up to his chin. "Sir?" "Yes, son. Will you be here when I wake up?" "I'll be right through that door. I'll leave it open. If you need anything, you just call my name." "What is your name?" "You never told me." Marcus realized with a small jolt of shame that the boy was right. They had spent 4 hours together, and he had never introduced himself. "It's Marcus, Eli. My name is Marcus Sinclair." "Good night, mister." "Marcus." "Good night, Eli." He turned the lamp off and watched from the doorway as the boy's breathing slowed and deepened. Within 5 minutes, Eli was asleep. Within 10, he was sleeping the way only an exhausted child can sleep, completely still, completely surrendered. Marcus walked back to his own room and sat down in the armchair by the window. He looked at his phone, which had begun to flicker faintly back to life on its bed of rice. He had 37 missed calls. 12 from his assistant, Vanessa. 8 from his attorney. 4 from the board chairman. The rest from numbers he did not recognize or did not want to recognize. He did not return a single one of them. Instead, he opened his laptop, which had been delivered with the dry clothes, and he began to type. He typed for 2 hours. He drafted an email to Vanessa instructing her to cancel his Monday meetings in New York. He drafted a note to his attorney, James Henley, asking him to look into emergency guardianship procedures in the state of Ohio for a minor child whose parent was deceased and whose only living relative could not currently be located. He drafted a third note to the head of his personal foundation, asking for an immediate report on the best long-term care facilities for orphaned children in Northeast Ohio, including which ones used the small home model rather than large institutional warehouses. When he finished, it was nearly 3 in the morning. He looked through the open door at the small shape under the white comforter. Eli had not moved. Marcus thought about his own mother, who had died when he was 42. She had spent her last years in a care facility in Connecticut that he had selected based on a spreadsheet of amenities. He had visited her twice, once on her birthday and once for Christmas. He had told himself it was because he was busy. He understood now, in the quiet of a Cleveland hotel room with a borrowed boy sleeping in the next room, that he had been busy because visiting her made him remember that he did not know how to love anyone, and the not knowing had felt like drowning, so he had simply stayed away from the water. He thought about his father, who had died when Marcus was 17, of a heart attack in the back of a taxicab on his way to a deal signing in Boston. The last words his father had ever said to him were, "Don't disappoint me on Yale." Marcus had not disappointed him on Yale. He had graduated summa cum laude. His father had not been alive to see it. He thought about all the children of his employees, whose names he had never bothered to learn. The Christmas cards he had signed in stacks without reading. The charity galas where he had written checks larger than the annual budgets of small towns, and had not once asked where the money actually went. And he thought about Eli Whitfield, 10 years old, who had stood in the rain and watched a stranger walk past him 4 times before deciding that the stranger's freezing body mattered more than his own jacket. Marcus closed the laptop. He walked to the door between the rooms and stood there for a long time, watching the boy sleep. The streetlights outside the window cast a soft blue glow across the bed. Eli's small chest rose and fell. The stuffed bear had slipped sideways onto the pillow. The boy's hand rested on the strap of the backpack, even in sleep. "I'm going to keep my promise, son," Marcus whispered into the dark room. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to keep it." The boy did not stir. Marcus walked back to the armchair, sat down, and watched the rain begin again outside the window. He did not sleep. He did not need to. For the first time in many years, his thoughts felt clean. Eli slept until almost 10 in the morning. When he woke, he did so all at once, sitting up in the bed with sudden alarm before remembering where he was. Marcus, who had been watching from the armchair with a cup of coffee in his hand, smiled gently. "Good morning, son. You slept like the dead." "Sir, what time is it?" "It's late. And that's a good thing. You needed it." Eli rubbed his eyes and looked down at himself, at the rocket ship pajamas, at the stuffed bear that had fallen onto the floor in the night. He picked Patch up carefully and brushed off invisible dirt. "Did you stay up, mister?" "Marcus, most of the night. I had some thinking to do." "About what?" "About you." Eli grew very still. "Sir, am I in trouble?" "Did somebody from the state call?" "No, son. Nobody called. You're not in trouble. But while you were sleeping, I made some calls of my own. I'd like to talk to you about them over breakfast. Is that all right?" Eli nodded slowly, his small face guarded. He had learned long ago that grown-ups with morning announcements often had bad news folded inside them. Breakfast arrived 20 minutes later. Pancakes piled high with strawberries and whipped cream. Crispy bacon. Scrambled eggs. Orange juice in a tall glass. Marcus watched the boy eat, this time with less reverence and more genuine hunger, the careful guard of last night beginning to lower just a little. "Eli," Marcus said when the boy had finished his second pancake, "I called my lawyer last night. A good man named James Henley. He's the best at what he does. And I asked him to find out what it would take for me to become your legal guardian." Eli's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "My what, sir?" "Your guardians. It means that legally you would be in my care. You would not have to go to a state home. You would not have to live in cardboard. You would have a place to live, food, school, doctors, everything a boy your age needs. And someday, when you're older, You would have helped to do whatever you want to do with your life. The boy set the fork down very carefully on the edge of his plate. His hands began to shake. Sir, why would you do that for me? Because last night you reminded me that I have spent my whole life being seen by everyone and known by no one. Because I have more rooms in my house than I have ever bothered to walk through. Because I have more money than I could spend in 20 lifetimes, and not a single person in the world who would notice if I disappeared tomorrow except the people I pay. And because you, Eli Whitfield, walked into my life and saw me when no one else did. Sir, I just gave you my coat. You gave me more than a coat, son. You gave me a chance to remember who I was supposed to become. Eli looked down at his plate. A single tear slid off the tip of his nose and landed in the maple syrup. He did not wipe it away. Mr. Marcus, I don't want to be a project. I don't want you to take me home and feel good about yourself for a week, and then forget me. If you're gonna do this, you gotta really do it. You gotta want me when I'm in trouble. You gotta want me when I'm being bad. You gotta want me when I cry about Mama, and that's gonna be a lot, sir. I cry about her every day. Sometimes twice. Then we'll cry about her together, Eli. And we'll talk about her until I know her almost as well as you do. The boy looked up, his eyes wet but steady. Sir, do you got kids of your own? No, son. I was married once, a long time ago. We didn't have children. She left because I worked too much. I don't blame her. Then you don't know how to be a dad. No, I don't. Eli considered this with the gravity of an old man. That's okay. I don't really remember how to be a son neither. Maybe we can figure it out together. Marcus felt something move in his chest that felt like a door he had locked many years ago finally swinging open. I think that sounds like a fair deal, Eli. Sir, can I ask one more thing? Anything. Can Mama's stuff come with us? Her Bible. Her ring. The picture from the zoo. Son, that's the first thing we're packing. The next 2 weeks moved faster than Marcus had imagined possible, and slower than Eli could bear. James Henley arrived in Cleveland on the first flight out of New York the morning after Marcus called. He was a tall, gray-haired man with the patient eyes of someone who had spent 40 years finding legal paths through human heartbreak. He met Eli in the hotel restaurant, ordered him a chocolate milkshake without being asked, and explained in plain language what becoming a ward would mean. You have rights, son, James told him, leaning forward over the table, and I'm here to protect them. Mr. Sinclair has asked me to look out for your interests, not his. So anything you don't understand, anything you don't like, anything that worries you, you tell me. Even if it's about him. Especially if it's about him. Eli nodded slowly. Sir, can I ask something? Anything. If Mr. Marcus changes his mind in a month, what happens to me? James glanced at Marcus, then back at the boy. Eli, that's exactly the kind of question I'm going to make sure we answer in the paperwork. If Mr. Sinclair ever changes his mind, you don't go back to the street. We make sure of that in writing. There will be a trust set up for you. A home set aside in your name. People who answer to you, not to him. That's my job. Eli looked at Marcus. Is that true, sir? It's true, son. Every word of it. The boy considered this for a long moment. Then he extended his small hand across the table to James Henley with the gravity of a head of state. Then I think we can do business, sir. James shook the hand with equal solemnity. Yes, son. I believe we can. The state agency was harder. A social worker named Mrs. Ramirez came to the hotel 2 days later, her face professional but skeptical, a clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. She interviewed Eli alone in a quiet corner of the lobby for almost an hour. When she came out, her eyes were red, and she walked straight to Marcus, who stood up to meet her. Mr. Sinclair, she said, I have been doing this work for 22 years. I have seen every kind of person try to take children for every kind of reason. I have placed boys like Eli in foster homes a dozen times, only to see them disappear back onto the street within a month, because the system could not hold them. She paused. Marcus waited. That boy in there told me that you sat in the rain for 2 hours because you were ashamed to walk into a warm building, and that he gave you his coat because his mother was a nurse who taught him about hypothermia. He told me you stayed up all night watching him sleep because he was afraid to close his eyes alone. He told me you cried over a stuffed bear you bought at a drugstore. Mr. Sinclair, in 22 years, I have never had a child describe a prospective guardian to me with that kind of language. What does that mean? Marcus asked quietly. It means I am going to recommend that the emergency custody petition be granted tomorrow morning. It also means that I will be watching you very closely for the next 12 months. If you fail this boy, I will personally drive to your home in Connecticut and remove him myself. Do we understand each other? Yes, Mrs. Ramirez. We understand each other perfectly. And I hope you'll visit often, even if I'm not failing. She studied him for a moment. I just might, Mr. Sinclair. I just might. The petition was granted. The paperwork took another week to fully process, and during that week, Marcus rented a furnished house in a quiet Cleveland neighborhood with a fenced yard and a school 3 blocks away. He did not move Eli to Connecticut. The boy needed continuity, James had said. The boy needed time. The boy needed to stay near the cemetery where his mother was buried. Marcus had not even thought to ask about the grave. He had assumed, with a wealthy man's careless instinct, that they would simply move on. When Eli mentioned it shyly one morning, that he had not been able to visit since the burial because the cemetery was across town and the bus cost too much, Marcus felt a hot wave of shame move through him, and that afternoon they went together. The grave was a small, flat marker in the corner of a public cemetery. Sarah Lynette Whitfield. Beloved mother. Eli knelt down and traced his mother's name with his fingertip, and Marcus stood behind him with his hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder, and neither of them spoke for a very long time. 6 months passed, then a year, then 2. The Cleveland house became a real home. Eli started 5th grade at the neighborhood elementary school, where he made friends slowly but kept them carefully, the way he kept everything that mattered. Marcus learned how to pack a lunchbox. He learned how to braid hair when Eli's cousin from Georgia came to visit, the Aunt Mrs. Ramirez had finally located, who wept on the phone for an hour before agreeing that her sister's son was safer where he was, but who came north 4 times a year and stayed for a week and taught Marcus things about Sarah Whitfield that made Eli laugh and cry in the same breath. Marcus stepped down as chief executive of Sinclair Industries the spring after the rain. He kept his seat on the board and his shares, but he moved his daily life to Cleveland. Vanessa, his old assistant, became the foundation's full-time director. The first program she launched was called the Whitfield Initiative, named for Sarah, and it funded mobile medical care for homeless children in 7 cities. Eli helped design the logo. He chose a small house with a yellow light in the window and a coat hanging on the door. The thin gray jacket, the original one, the one Eli had pressed into Marcus's freezing hands on 11th Street, hung in a glass shadow box on the wall of the foyer of the Cleveland house. Beneath it, in simple brass letters, was a single sentence Eli had chosen himself. He saw a stranger and warmed him first. Visitors often asked about it. Eli would tell the story plainly, without drama and without pride. He would say, "My mama taught me that." He would say, "Mr. Marcus needed help and I had a coat." He would say, "The rest is just what happens when people decide to stay." On the 2nd anniversary of the night in the rain, they sat together on the front porch of the Cleveland house, drinking hot chocolate in the December cold. Eli was 12 now. He had grown 4 inches. His voice was beginning to deepen. The boy who had once weighed almost nothing now had shoulders that hinted at the man he would become. Marcus was 62, and his hair had gone almost completely silver, and he had learned to laugh in a way that startled the people who had known him before. "Mr. Marcus." "Yes, son." Eli had taken to calling him Dad sometimes, when it slipped out but Mr. Marcus had stayed too, like an old name they both kept for the sake of how they had met. "Do you remember what you said on the steps that night? About how I was the only one who stopped?" "I remember. I've been thinking. There's probably somebody out there tonight, walking past somebody else, and nobody's stopping for either of them. Marcus looked at the boy. The street lamp on the corner cast a soft halo over them both. Probably so, son. So I was thinking. The foundation, the medical thing, that's good. But maybe we should do another one. Just for jackets. Just for the cold. We give coats to anyone who needs one. No questions. No asking why. Just here, take this, you are seen. We could call it the coat closet. Or something better. I haven't figured out the name yet. Marcus felt the familiar ache behind his eyes that had become almost daily now. The ache of a man who had spent so many years not feeling that the feeling kept arriving in waves he was still learning to ride. Eli Whitfield, he said quietly, I think that is the best idea I have heard in 2 years. We can name it whatever you want, Dad. No, son. You name it. You always know the right names for things. Eli looked out at the dark street, at the small Christmas lights blinking on the houses across the way, at the world that had once tried to swallow him whole and had instead been gently rearranged around him. He thought for a long time. I think we should call it Take My Coat. Marcus closed his eyes. He nodded once slowly. Take my coat it is. And somewhere out in the cold of a winter night, in a city neither of them would ever visit, another stranger would be standing in another rain, and another small hand would reach out, and another small voice would say the words that had once changed everything. The lesson of this story is that true wealth is not measured by what we own, but by what we are willing to give when we have almost nothing. A homeless boy with one coat saw a billionaire shaking in the rain and understood something most adults have forgotten. That kindness is not a transaction, it is a recognition. We are all just strangers waiting to be seen, and the smallest hands often carry the largest hearts. When we offer what little we have with love, we awaken something in others that no fortune can buy.